Officer saw a drunk man pouring gas on a German shepherd, then realized the dog was a missing canine. The storm had chewed up the highway and spit it back out in broken lines of snow and shadow. Officer Ryan Keller had seen plenty of bad nights during his 12 years in uniform, but Frostline mountain storms carried a different kind of silence, the kind that made a man feel like the world was holding its breath. He eased the cruiser along the empty road, wipers dragging across the windshield with a tired rhythm. Dispatch was quiet, too quiet for a Friday night. Ryan tried to shake off the feeling crawling under his skin. Then he saw it, a flicker of orange against the dark where no fire should be. Ryan braked hard. Snow kicked up around the cruiser. The glow came from the old Ridgeway gas stop, a place that had been boarded up since before he moved to Frostline. No electricity, no heat, nothing but dust and forgotten stories. Yet a flame danced there now, small but vicious, licking at the wind. Ryan stepped out into the cold. The moment the door shut behind him, the air felt wrong, charged, metallic, carrying a smell he recognized instantly. Gasoline. He moved fast, hand on his holster, boots sinking into fresh snow. As he rounded the fuel pump, the scene snapped into focus, sharp, brutal, and enough to punch the air from his lungs. A man hunched over something on the ground. His coat was soaked, his movements sloppy, unsteady. A metal gas can tipped dangerously close to his boots. And beneath him, a German shepherd. Big, male, muzzled, legs bound with rope, fur soaked in gasoline. The dog trembled in the snow, fighting just to stay upright. Ryan's voice cracked through the wind. "Step away from the dog, now." The man turned. Red cheeks, unfocused eyes, pupils blown wide. Hank Brader, local drunk, known loudmouth, known trouble. But this was something different. His hand twitched around a cheap plastic lighter. "I said step away," Ryan repeated, already closing in. Hank smirked, a warped grin. "It ain't what it looks like, officer. I'm just putting him out of his misery." Ryan didn't think. Training took over. He lunged. His gloved hand slammed Hank's wrist against the frozen pump, knocking the lighter into the snow. Hank swung wildly, but drunken strength couldn't match Ryan's momentum. Seconds later, Hank was face down in the snow, with Ryan's knee on his back, cuffs snapping shut. "You're done," Ryan muttered. Hank's laugh was broken, too loud for the empty night. "You don't know a damn thing." Ryan ignored him and rushed to the shepherd. The dog flinched at his approach. Not fear, something deeper, something learned. "It's okay," Ryan whispered, cutting the rope with his pocket knife. Up close, the damage was worse. The dog's fur was scorched at the tips, skin raw from old scars, ribs showing under the coat. But it was the eyes that stopped Ryan cold. Bright amber eyes that refused to look away, even in pain. Eyes that held something human, something pleading. "Easy, buddy," Ryan breathed. "I've got you." He lifted the dog carefully. The shepherd winced but stayed silent, head resting against Ryan's shoulder as if surrendering to the moment. That was when Ryan smelled it. Not gasoline this time, not blood. Burned ink. And then he saw it. Under the matted fur, hidden beneath scars, a faint tattoo glimmered under Ryan's flashlight. The numbers were almost erased, but not enough to hide their meaning. K9D17. Ryan froze. He had read that number before. 14 months ago. A training explosion. A collapsed bunker. One handler dead. One K9 presumed gone. But not gone, not burned, not buried. Alive. In his arms. Atlas. The missing K9 whose case had been locked away so tightly that even Ryan couldn't access the full file. The shepherd stirred weakly, pressing his muzzle against Ryan's chest as if recognizing something in him, a scent, a memory, a promise. Then Hank shouted from behind, voice cracking through the storm. You should have let him burn. Ryan whipped around. Why? What do you know? Hank's grin returned, distorted and chilling despite the cuffs. That dog's death was ordered, and you just ruined everything. Before Ryan could ask more, a sound echoed from the woods behind the station, a sharp crack, like a branch snapping under weight. Ryan turned, scanning the trees. The dog jolted in his arms, ears pricking, muscles tightening as if bracing for a threat he had learned to fear. Someone else was out there. Someone who wanted the dog gone. Ryan backed toward the cruiser, keeping the shepherd close. Snow began to fall harder, swallowing the world in white. The storm had never felt this quiet, or this dangerous. He opened the passenger door and whispered, "Hang in there, Atlas, or whatever your real name is." The dog looked at him, tired, wounded, but alive, and something unspoken passed between them. Not fear, recognition. Ryan didn't know it yet, but saving that dog had just put a target on his back. And somewhere in the darkness, the real enemy was already moving. The drive through the storm felt longer than the mountain itself. Ryan kept one hand on the wheel and the other steadying the German shepherd curled in the passenger seat. The dog barely moved, but every so often a tremor ran through his muscles, a silent shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. Snow hammered the windshield, and the cruiser's heater fought to keep up. Frostline Veterinary Clinic glowed faintly through the storm, its porch light flickering like a beacon in the dark. Ryan pulled up and carried the shepherd inside, cradling him against his chest. He weighed more than Ryan expected, but there was no resistance, no growl, only a quiet resignation, as if the dog had learned long ago that fighting back only brought more pain. Dr. Naomi Pierce appeared from the back room with a blanket around her shoulders and a pair of glasses pushed up into her messy hair. 30 years old, sharp, unfiltered, and the closest thing Frostline had to an emergency room after midnight. She stopped dead when she saw the dog. "What happened?" she asked, already switching into the clipped, efficient tone of a professional. "Gasoline, almost set on fire," Ryan said. "There's more. Old injuries, scars everywhere." Naomi motioned him toward the exam table. "Lay him down gently." The shepherd tensed the moment his paws touched metal. Not a bark, not a whine, just a sudden stiffening, like a soldier bracing for orders. Naomi examined him without hesitation. "Ribs underweight, multiple scar lines. Look at this pattern. These aren't from fights with other dogs, these are from restraints." She moved her fingers across his flank and stopped. "And this is a bullet fragment, lodged deep, from months ago at least." Ryan felt his jaw tighten. Someone thought he was disposable. Someone used him. Naomi corrected quietly. She picked up a lighter from the counter to check pupil dilation. The moment the metal clicked open, the shepherd exploded upward. His claws scraped the table, eyes wide with terror, body twisting away from the tiny flame that hadn't even been lit. Ryan lunged forward and caught him before he could fall. The reaction hit Naomi like a physical blow. That's not fear. That's memory. PTSD response. Ryan held the dog close until he went still again, though his trembling continued like an aftershock. The way he leaned into Ryan's chest, desperate for something solid, something human, tugged at a part of Ryan he'd sealed off years ago. Naomi lowered her voice. "What's his name?" Ryan hesitated. The tattoo was still burned into his mind. K9D17, a number, a ghost from a case that had never made sense. But he couldn't call the dog a number, not after what he survived. "Ghost," Ryan said softly. "Feels right." The dog lifted his head at the word, as if testing it. Ghost, a creature pulled out of the dark, a survivor of something the world had tried to erase. Naomi nodded approvingly. "Ghost it is." She gave Ryan a look he recognized. She had noticed something he hadn't said. "There's more," she said. "I can see it in your face." Ryan exhaled slowly. "That tattoo. I know the designation. He's a missing K9, declared dead. But obviously someone lied." "That kind of lie takes power," Naomi murmured. Before Ryan could respond, Ghost suddenly snapped his head toward the clinic door. His ears perked, body leaned forward, breath hitching. A deep, primal rumble formed in his chest, not loud, but unmistakably a warning. Naomi froze. What's he sensing? Ryan stepped toward the door and peered through the frosted glass. Nothing but swirling snow. Ghost didn't relax. His stare stayed locked on the darkness outside, muscles coiled tight. Ryan had seen dogs track danger before, but this was different. This wasn't alert behavior. This was recognition. Ryan spoke quietly. He knows whoever hurt him. A sudden thump hit the side of the building. Naomi jumped. Ryan reached for his gun. Ghost leapt off the exam table despite his weakness, placing himself between Ryan and the door with surprising force. His growl vibrated across the clinic floor. Ryan approached slowly, pistol drawn, listening to the wind. But the storm swallowed everything. Then, faintly, beneath the howl of snow, came a metallic click. Not a gun. A lighter. Flicked open once, then twice, as if in defiance. Ghost's entire body buckled. Memories slammed into him like a blow. Ryan grabbed his collar, steadying him. The trembling wasn't fear alone. It was rage. Buried deep, but alive. Naomi whispered, "Who the hell finds a closed clinic at 1 a.m. during a blizzard?" Ryan didn't answer. He pushed the door open and stepped onto the porch, wind slashing across his face. The footprints leading away from the building were already filling with snow, but they were fresh. Minutes old. Someone had followed them here. Someone who knew Ghost wasn't supposed to survive. Inside, Ghost pressed his head into the glass, watching Ryan through the door, eyes burning with something wordless and fierce. A promise. Ryan looked back at him and felt it settle inside him, like a vow he didn't choose but couldn't reject. Ghost had found him for a reason. Or maybe in the darkness of Frostline, Ryan had been the one meant to find Ghost. And someone out there already wanted that bond broken. Ryan stayed at the clinic long after Naomi went home to rest. The storm kept beating against the windows, turning the world outside into a shifting wall of white. Inside, only the soft hum of the heater and Ghost's slow breathing filled the silence. Ryan sat at Naomi's desk, the glow of the computer screen painting his face in pale blue. He typed the tattoo number again. K9D17. The database hesitated, as if deciding whether to respond. Then a restricted access screen appeared. He paused. His badge level shouldn't give him access to anything classified above routine K9 reports. But tonight, the system flickered, stuttered, then let him in. A file opened. Sparse at first, then quickly unfolding into a long list of operational logs. Ryan leaned in. Designation: K9D17 name, Atlas Unit, Denver Tactical Response Primary Handler, Sergeant Lucas Ward. Status: missing, presumed deceased. Incident: training facility explosion. Date: 14 months prior. Case file: sealed by order of Chief Darren Lowe. Ryan's chest tightened. Lowe had been a commanding officer back then, before transferring to Frostline. He never mentioned a sealed K9 case. He never mentioned Sergeant Lucas Ward either. The name tugged at something vague in Ryan's memory, like a headline he skimmed once and forgot. He scrolled. Sergeant Lucas Ward, decorated, commended twice for bravery, killed instantly in the blast. But the details of the explosion were missing. Entire paragraphs replaced by blank spaces and outdated security stamps. Someone had erased the truth, and they hadn't bothered to hide the erasure. Ryan leaned back, frustration simmering. "What happened to you?" he whispered. Behind him, Ghost shifted on the blanket near the heater. One ear lifted, then dropped again. He looked exhausted. But those eyes, even half-lidded, tracked Ryan's every movement. "You knew him, didn't you?" Ryan said softly. "Lucas Ward." Ghost didn't react outwardly, but something in his breathing changed, a tightening, a subtle anticipation. Ryan returned to the file. At the very bottom was an anomaly, a corrupted audio file, 90 seconds long. He clicked it, expecting static. The recording began with a low hum. Wind, a struggling breath, metal scraping. A man's voice whispered through the distortion, hoarse, fading. "Atlas, leave it! Go! Run!" A sharp bang followed. A scuffle, a growl, raw and desperate. Then another voice, cold, steady. "End it! No survivors!" The audio died in a burst of static. Ryan stared at the screen, every muscle in his body tightened. The second voice. He couldn't place it, but something about the tone sent a chill through him. Ghost suddenly lifted his head, ears pointed sharply toward the back entrance of the clinic. His body stiffened. A low, warning growl rose in his throat. Ryan stood immediately. "What is it?" Ghost pushed himself to his feet, despite the pain, limping towards the door. His tail wasn't up, wasn't wagging. It was low, controlled, like a trained dog slipping into professional alert mode. Something outside had triggered him. Ryan grabbed a flashlight and followed Ghost to the back door. The shepherd pressed his nose to the gap at the bottom, sniffing sharply. His body was no longer trembling from fear. It was something else entirely. Purpose. Ryan opened the door just enough for them to slip out. The cold sliced through his jacket, but Ghost moved with intent, leading Ryan behind the clinic and toward the tree line. "Ghost, slow down," Ryan whispered. But Ghost refused. He limped, yes, but there was determination behind every step. Snow whipped across their boots and paws. Ghost paused once, sniffed the air, then changed direction, veering toward the darker part of the woods. Ryan followed, heart pounding. They reached a clearing half hidden behind drifts of snow. Ghost stopped, nose to the ground. He circled once, then barked sharply, a sound more command than alarm. Ryan crouched, aiming the flashlight low. Something metallic glinted beneath the freshly fallen snow. Bullet casings. Old ones. Half buried, but not rusted enough to be from 14 months ago. "Someone's been shooting back here recently," Ryan murmured. Ghost barked again and moved farther into the trees. His paw hit something, and he pushed snow aside, revealing a long, shallow drag mark. The line cut through the snow, over dirt, past a broken stump, disappearing into deeper brush. A body had been dragged. Human or canine, Ryan couldn't tell. Ghost kept following it, nose pressed to the ground, breaths short and sharp. The air around him changed. He wasn't just tracking, he was remembering. Ryan hurried to keep up. "Ghost, wait, I need to see." They reached the end of the drag marks. Ghost stopped before a cluster of rocks blackened by old fire damage. Snow melted strangely fast in this spot, revealing charred wood and fragments of something metallic. Ryan knelt and brushed the ash aside. His fingers froze. A shredded Kevlar plate, one used in tactical K9 vests. Atlas had been here, and he hadn't been alone. Ghost stared at the ruined vest, then let out a sound Ryan had never heard from him. A deep, broken whine, thick with grief. Ryan's throat tightened. "This is where you crawled away, isn't it? After the blast." Ghost nudged the vest with his muzzle. His eyes glistened, reflecting Ryan's flashlight like shards of amber glass. Then Ryan noticed something else. A boot print, half covered by snow, fresh, hours old at most. Someone had come back to check the site tonight. Ryan stood slowly, scanning the woods. The flashlight beam trembled as the realization settled in. Ghost, we weren't followed to the clinic. Ghost lifted his head. They were already here. A branch snapped behind them. Ghost lunged in front of Ryan, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling from deep inside his chest. Ryan raised his gun towards the sound. The storm swallowed everything again. But the message was clear. Someone was hunting Atlas, and now they knew exactly who was protecting him. Hank Brader sat hunched in the interrogation room, wrists chained to the metal table, breath sour with the stench of old liquor. The storm outside had calmed, but inside the small police station of Frostline, the air carried its own electric tension. Ryan stood on the other side of the glass, watching Hank scratch at a peeling corner of the table like a man trying to dig himself out of his own skin. Ghost lay beside Ryan in the hallway, bandaged but alert, head resting between his paws. Every time Hank shifted in his chair, Ghost's ears twitched. If the shepherd could speak, Ryan knew he would already have the truth. Ryan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Hank jolted slightly, though he tried to cover it with a crooked laugh. "You look like hell, officer," Hank muttered. "Bet that mutt's causing you more trouble than he's worth." Ryan ignored the comment and sat down calmly. "Start talking. Why were you trying to burn him alive?" Hank stared at the table, fingers twitching. "I told you already. I was told to get rid of him." "By who?" Silence. Ryan leaned forward. "Hank, you nearly committed arson, animal cruelty, attempted murder if you count a trained K9. You're one word away from cutting years off whatever sentence is coming." Hank's jaw clenched. "You don't get it." "Then help me understand." Hank swallowed hard, shoulders rising with a deep breath. "I'm not the guy you're looking for. I'm just the one they call when someone needs cleaning up. They tell me where to go, what to do. I don't ask questions." Ryan's voice hardened. "Who gives the orders?" Hank's mouth opened, then shut again. His eyes darted to the camera in the corner, then to the door, then to Ryan. "No," he whispered. "If I say his name, I'm dead." "You're already in a cell. He can't touch you." Hank let out a low, humorless laugh. "You're naive, Keller. You think these walls protect me?" Ryan's pulse ticked up. "It's someone from Denver, isn't it?" Hank froze. The stillness was louder than any confession. Ryan pressed. "The explosion that killed Sergeant Lucas Ward and supposedly killed Atlas, that wasn't an accident. Someone ordered those dogs erased." Hank's breathing grew shallow. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. It wasn't supposed to come back." "Who?" Ryan repeated, voice a quiet blade. Hank's lips trembled. "I can't." "You can, or you'll go down alone." Hank's eyes flicked up, terrified and defeated. "I was told the dog wasn't just missing. He was a liability, a threat." "To who?" Another pause. Then, almost inaudible, "The man in charge." Ryan's stomach dropped. Only one name fit. Chief Darren Lowe. The man who had hired Ryan. The man who had written Ryan's recommendation letter. The man who ran Frostline with a steady hand and a seemingly clean record. Hank's silence confirmed it. Ryan stood so abruptly the chair squealed across the tiles. "You're telling me the chief tried to eliminate a K9 unit that survived an explosion?" "I told you everything I can." Hank hissed. "You don't know the kind of power he has." Ryan didn't answer. He walked out, slamming the door behind him. Ghost lifted his head as Ryan stepped into the hall. His amber eyes searched Ryan's face, reading the tension he couldn't hide. The shepherd limped forward, nudging Ryan's knee, as if asking what the next move was. Naomi appeared from the side corridor, arms crossed, worry etched across her face. "I saw the way you stormed out. What did he say?" Ryan took a breath, steadying himself. He admitted he was following orders. "From who?" Ryan hesitated. Low. Naomi blinked. Your chief? Ryan nodded. A thick silence settled between them. Naomi spoke first. Ryan, that means someone with authority tried to erase Atlas from existence. Not just lose paperwork. Erase him. Ghost gave a low whine, the kind that sounded almost human. He placed his head against Naomi's palm, letting her steady him. She scratched gently behind his ears, visibly shaken. He's still reacting to any mention of that. Explosion, Naomi said. The sound of a lighter, the smell of gasoline. That's conditioning born from trauma. Ryan nodded. Whatever happened to him didn't end the night of the blast. Someone kept trying to finish the job. Naomi's eyes widened a little, connecting dots she didn't want to believe. And if Lowe ordered it once, he might not be done. Ghost suddenly stiffened, his nose lifted, nostrils flaring. He took 3 steps toward the hallway leading to the front entrance of the station. A growl rumbled from deep inside his chest, low and unwavering. Ryan grabbed his gun. What is it? Ghost didn't break his stare. Naomi backed up slowly. Something's outside. Ryan moved toward the entrance, Ghost glued to his side despite the limp. The station lights flickered, buzzing once before stabilizing. A cold draft snaked under the main door. Then came the sound. A click. The distinct metallic snap of a lighter being opened. Ghost snarled, full force, a sound so sharp it seemed to cut through the hallway. Ryan swung open the door and aimed his flashlight into the snow. Nothing. Wind. Snow. Empty parking lot. But someone had been there. Someone close enough to provoke Ghost. Ryan shut the door and locked it. They're watching us. Naomi put a hand on Ghost's back. They're watching him. A realization hit Ryan with brutal clarity. If Lowe sealed the file, and Hank was ordered to finish the dog, then Lowe knows Atlas survived the blast. Naomi's voice cracked. And he knows Atlas is with you. Ghost leaned into Ryan again, steady and resolute, as if sensing the storm tightening around them. Ryan rested a hand on the shepherd's neck. Whatever they tried to erase, I'm going to uncover it, he whispered. Ghost didn't look away. His silence said everything. He had survived fire once. He wasn't running anymore. The snow on Pinecliff Ridge was deeper than anything in town, untouched by tire tracks or hikers, the kind of place that stayed exactly as the past left it. The wind cut through the pines in long, uneven breaths, and the path narrowed until only one set of footprints could fit at a time. Ghost walked ahead of them with surprising certainty for a dog still healing from burns and trauma. His limp showed, but his purpose was undeniable. Every few yards, he stopped, sniffed the air, then continued, as if following a scent no human would have noticed. Naomi hugged her coat tighter. How does he even know this place exists? Ryan trudged beside her. Because he's been here before. Ghost stopped suddenly near a cluster of dead trees, their bark blackened by old fire damage. The shepherd lowered his head, sniffed the ground, then began to paw at the snow with a rising urgency. Ryan stepped forward. He found something. Ghost growled softly and kept digging. Naomi joined him, using her gloved hands to help clear the snow. Beneath the first layer was hardened, dirt that crumbled at the touch. A smell rose with it, faint, metallic. Then Naomi uncovered something that made her stop breathing. A bone, long, thin, smooth from age, not human. Ryan, she whispered. He knelt beside her and brushed snow aside with slow, deliberate movements. More bones emerged, a rib cage, the curved outline of a canine skull. Then another, and another, a graveyard. Ryan felt the world tilt. This isn't an accident site. Naomi stared at the open pit, voice trembling. This is organized, buried deliberately, same depth, same spacing. Ghost sat down at the edge of the grave, shoulders squared but head lowered. His eyes softened, not in fear, but in mourning. He placed one paw gently on the earth, his breathing slowing to a steady, heavy rhythm. Ryan touched the nearest skull. Something metal clinked against his glove. He lifted it, a small, rusted tag with half a serial number still engraved. K9D12. Naomi exhaled. They're all K9 units. Ghost stepped forward and nudged the tag with his nose. Then he moved to the next mound, where Naomi uncovered another bone, another tag. This one read K9A03. Ryan closed his eyes for a moment. Lowe didn't lose one dog. He erased a program. He stood and looked down at Ghost. The shepherd had gone completely still, sitting upright as if standing guard over old friends. Snow collected around his ears and muzzle. He didn't shake it off. Naomi's voice broke the silence. Ryan, these dogs didn't die in the explosion, at least not all of them. No, Ryan said, jaw tightening. Someone gathered the survivors and put them here. Naomi shuddered. Why cover it up? Why kill trained service dogs? Ryan's mind raced back to the sealed files, the corrupted audio, the erased reports. Because something happened during that operation that someone didn't want exposed, and a trained K9 doesn't forget what it sees. A branch cracked behind them. Ghost's head snapped up, a deep, low growl rumbling from his chest. His entire body tensed, muscles coiled despite the pain in his side. Ryan raised his gun. Show yourself! Wind howled through the ridge, but beneath it, footsteps crunched in the snow. Moving slowly, deliberately. A figure appeared between the trees. For a moment, Ryan thought it was Lowe. Same broad shoulders, same rigid posture. But as the figure stepped closer, Ryan saw a different face. A younger man, early 40s, sharp eyes, wearing a ranger jacket that didn't match the season or the place. I wouldn't shoot, the man said. Not unless you want answers buried with you. Ryan kept the gun raised. Who are you? The man lifted his hands. Earl Maddox. I work maintenance at the old Denver Tactical Grounds. Or I did, until everything went downhill. Naomi moved behind Ryan instinctively. Ghost stepped in front of both of them, snarling. Earl swallowed hard. Easy, boy. I'm not here to hurt you. Ryan kept his voice cold. You were following us. I was making sure you didn't end up like the rest of them. What rest? Earl looked down at the open grave. Snowflakes caught in his eyelashes. You think this is the only pit? The ridge has 6 more. Ryan didn't lower his gun. Explain. Earl exhaled shakily. The explosion didn't kill those dogs. It injured them, badly. The trainers panicked. They called the chief. He said the smartest thing to do was dispose of the evidence. Too many risks, too many loose ends. If the dogs survived, they'd point back to what really happened that night. And what was that? Ryan asked. Earl hesitated. A botched, unauthorized raid. A political mess. The kind of thing that ends careers. So instead of admitting it, they buried it. Literally. Ghost growled louder, eyes locked on Earl. Earl nodded toward the shepherd. That one, he fought harder than the rest. He got away. They never forgave that. Naomi whispered. They hunted him. Earl nodded. For months. Ryan stepped closer. Why tell us this? Earl's voice cracked. Because I tried to stop it. I tried to save at least one of them. I helped Atlas escape the last time they cornered him. If Lowe finds out I talked, I'm done. Ghost slowly walked toward Earl, each step careful, measuring. The man froze as the shepherd sniffed his sleeve. Ghost's growl faded. Not out of trust, but recognition. Ryan lowered the gun half an inch. You helped him. I tried, Earl said softly. But they found me, beat me, warned me to keep quiet. Ghost nudged Earl's coat once more, then returned to the grave, sitting exactly where he had been before, eyes locked on the bones of fallen canines. It was a simple gesture, but it held the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. This wasn't a clean-up. This was a purge. Earl nodded. And Low isn't finished. A cold silence fell over the ridge. The snow felt heavier, the wind sharper, as if the mountain itself understood what they had unearthed. Naomi looked at Ryan, fear tightening her voice. If Low wiped out all these trained dogs to protect himself, what do you think he'll do now that Atlas survived? Ryan didn't have to answer. Ghost raised his head, staring into the forest as if sensing a distant memory. His posture wasn't fearful anymore. It was resolute. He had survived the purge once. And now, with Ryan beside him, he wasn't facing it alone. The sun had barely risen when the encrypted email arrived in Ryan's inbox. He stood in the empty briefing room of the Frostline Sheriff's Department, the heater humming weakly as snowflakes tapped against the frosted window. The sender was the Denver ballistic tech he trusted most, someone who had owed him a favor from years back. The report was short, but each line sank like a stone. The bullet extracted from the dog matches a Winchester. Model 70. Caliber, 270 registered owner, Hank Brada. Trigger signature, inconsistent with Brada's dominant hand pressure. Second shooter confirmed. Ryan stared at the words. Someone else fired the gun. He murmured. Not Hank. Hank had been the one holding the dog when Ryan found him, but not the one who'd shot Atlas in the first place. Hank was just another pawn. A chill walked up Ryan's spine, and it wasn't the cold. Someone higher up had ordered the hit, someone with authority, someone who knew exactly what Atlas had survived. He closed the laptop and headed for the door. He needed Naomi, he needed Ghost, and he needed to finish this. By the time he reached Pine Cliff Ridge again, the sky had turned iron gray. Snow scudded sideways in sharp bursts. Naomi stood by the grave pit with Ghost at her side, her breath visible in the cold. Her eyes widened the moment she saw Ryan's face. What happened? Ryan handed her the printed report. The bullet inside Ghost wasn't fired by Hank. Someone else used Hank's rifle. Naomi frowned. You think Hank was forced into it? No, Ryan said. He was just used to hide the real shooter. Ghost growled suddenly, hackles lifting. He turned toward the tree line, body low, muscles tensing. Naomi swallowed. Ryan, he hears something. Ryan drew his weapon. Someone's here. A shadow moved between the pines, slow, deliberate, unhurried. The kind of walk you only saw from someone who believed the world should step aside for them. Chief Darren Lowe emerged from the woods wearing his uniform coat, his badge glinting, a rifle slung casually over his shoulder. Snow dusted his hair and shoulders. His expression was calm, too calm. Ryan felt his pulse spike. Chief. Naomi stepped back instinctively, Ghost positioning himself between her and Lowe. Lowe stopped 10 feet away, eyes scanning the open grave, the exposed tags, the bones of canine officers that should have been buried with honor. So, Lowe said softly, you found it. Ryan kept the gun raised. You were the second shooter. Lowe didn't deny it. A wounded dog with classified exposure? I did what had to be done. Ghost let out a low snarl that vibrated through the air. Lowe's gaze snapped to the shepherd. He wasn't supposed to survive. He saw everything. He followed me after the explosion, tried to drag his handler out of the fire. When I shot him the first time, I assumed he'd die in the woods. Naomi's voice trembled with anger. You killed his handler. Lowe exhaled through his nose. Sergeant Ward refused to follow orders. He tried to pull the team out when the raid went sideways, but command didn't want retreat on the report, so Ward was neutralized by the blast, and the dogs were evidence. Ryan finished coldly. Lowe nodded. Evidence that the raid was unauthorized, that we used canines against federal protocol, that we risked a diplomatic scandal. Denver would have shut us down. Careers would have ended. Lives did end. Naomi shot back. Lowe's eyes hardened. I protected this department. I protected the badge. Ryan steadied his aim. No, you buried the truth, and you turned a service dog into a target. Lowe tilted his head, as if studying Ryan for the first time. You were always the idealist. That's why I brought you here. Foolish enough to believe in right and wrong? Smart enough to be useful? Ghost stepped forward, teeth bared. Lowe raised the rifle a fraction. Take another step, dog, and you'll go back into the ground. Ryan's grip tightened. Put the gun down, Chief. Too late for that. Lowe suddenly pivoted, swinging the rifle toward Naomi. Time slowed. Snow froze midair. Ryan shouted. But Ghost moved first. The shepherd launched himself in one explosive leap, slamming into Naomi and knocking her to the ground just as Lowe fired. The shot cracked across the ridge, echoing through the trees. A spray of red mist hit the snow. Ghost whimpered once. Ryan fired instinctively. Lowe ducked behind a tree, disappearing into the shadows as the sound of gunfire rang across the ridge. Ghost! Naomi cried. Ryan dropped to his knees beside the dog. Ghost lay on his side, his breathing ragged, his golden eyes unfocused. Blood seeped through his fur, staining the snow beneath him. Naomi's hands shook violently as she pressed them over the wound. Stay with me, Ghost. Stay with me. Ryan's voice broke. He saved you. Ghost lifted his head weakly, nuzzling her wrist. His tail tapped the snow once, faint but intentional. Then his gaze shifted to Ryan. Recognition, trust, and something like an apology. Ryan shook his head. No, buddy, don't you dare! The snowstorm swallowed the sounds of the forest, leaving only Ghost's uneven breaths and Naomi's frantic whispering. He took the bullet for you, Ryan said, voice raw. He chose you. Footsteps crunched somewhere deeper in the woods. Lowe was retreating. Ryan looked down at Ghost one last time, brushing a hand over the shepherd's head. I swear to you I'll finish this. Ghost closed his eyes, his breath shuddering but still there. Alive. Barely. Ryan rose, rage burning through him, hotter than any fire that had taken Atlas's old life. Naomi's hand stayed on the dog, desperate and trembling. Go, she whispered without looking up. Get him. Ryan's jaw clenched. Keep Ghost alive. He sprinted into the trees, gun raised, heart pounding, knowing what came next was no longer duty. It was vengeance. It was justice. It was a promise made to a loyal soul dying in the snow. The storm blew itself out by morning, leaving Frostline coated in a clean, deceptive silence. Inside the small surgical wing of Dr. Naomi Pierce's clinic, the world had narrowed to the rise and fall of one battered German shepherd's chest. Ghost lay wrapped in heated blankets, IV lines taped to his foreleg, thick sutures running along his ribs where the bullet had torn through. The monitors beeped steadily, though every now and then his heart rate dipped just enough to make Naomi lift her head, waiting for the climb back up. Ryan hadn't slept in 24 hours. He sat in a plastic chair beside the operating table, elbows on his knees, staring at Ghost with a look that resembled both fear and prayer. Naomi finished adjusting the bandages and stepped back quietly. He's a fighter, she whispered. If it had been any other dog, he wouldn't have made it. Ryan nodded slowly. He's not any other dog. Ghost stirred at the sound of Ryan's voice. One eyelid twitched, revealing the faint gleam of gold beneath. He didn't lift his head, but his tail tapped once against the blanket, a soft, tired greeting. Naomi exhaled in relief. Responsive. That's a good sign. He knows you're here. Ryan swallowed hard. He better get used to that. Hours later, Ryan stood on the courthouse steps in Denver, a folder of evidence in his hands. Earl Maddox was escorted in beside him, nervous but resolute. Reporters gathered across the street, unaware of the storm about to break. A federal judge reviewed the file with an expression that shifted from curiosity to shock to barely contained fury. Photographs of shallow graves, audio files extracted from corrupted drives, ballistic reports proving the second shooter. Earl's testimony, tags recovered from Pine Cliff Ridge, records showing Lowe had ordered the raid that killed Sergeant Ward, orders to silence the surviving K-9 units, and at the center of it all, Atlas, K-9 D-17, lost, hunted, shot, and left for dead. Ghost's story was irrefutable. By late afternoon, U.S. Marshals entered Frostline to place Chief Darren Lowe in custody. Ryan watched from across the lot as Lowe was handcuffed beside the same cruiser he once used to patrol the town. The chief didn't fight. He didn't shout. He didn't even flinch. He only looked at Ryan and said, "You think this restores anything? Careers will burn. Departments will fall apart." Ryan stepped forward. "Then let them. The truth deserves the fallout." Lowe's jaw flexed, but he said nothing else as the marshals led him away. Hank Brader was arrested the same evening. Though he hadn't fired the shot that nearly killed Ghost, he had participated willingly in the attempted execution at the gas station. The charges stacked against him like bricks. Animal cruelty, evidence destruction, conspiracy, assault. Hank sobbed through most of the booking process, insisting he was only following orders. The law no longer cared. For the first time in 14 months, the sealed K-9 records were opened. Publicly, honestly. And without euphemism, the Denver Tactical Response Dogs had not died heroes in a single explosion. They had been silenced to protect careers. Their graves on Pine Cliff Ridge were mapped, documented, and honored. Each tag was placed in a memorial case. Families of fallen handlers were notified. Apologies were delivered that came far too late. Atlas's name appeared on the list. Not as deceased, but as survived. 3 days after surgery, Ghost finally tried to stand. Naomi rushed forward to steady him, but he shook her off gently. The shepherd took 2 trembling steps, collapsed onto his haunches, then tried again. Determined. Unwavering. Ryan watched from the doorway, unable to hide the smile that tugged at his mouth. "Look at you," he whispered. "Stubborn as ever." Ghost's ears pricked at the familiar voice. He turned, limping toward Ryan. When he reached him, Ghost leaned his full weight against his leg, resting his head on Ryan's thigh. Naomi wiped her eyes discreetly. "He's choosing you again." Ryan crouched and placed a hand on Ghost's neck, feeling the warmth of life beneath the bandages. "I don't know if I deserve a dog like you." Ghost nudged Ryan's chin, as if dismissing the thought entirely. A week later, a federal ceremony was held in Denver's old courthouse. The building hadn't seen a crowd like this in years. Officers stood shoulder to shoulder, veterans lined the walls, photographers and news crews filled the aisles. At the center of the stage was a single podium, and beside it, a German shepherd with a healing scar down his flank. Ghost wore a new collar, black leather, polished tag, Atlas, K-9 D-17, honorary service officer. The judge delivering the speech paused, visibly moved. This dog survived betrayal, injury, and abandonment, but he never lost his purpose. He defended civilians, protected a doctor, and risked his life for an officer. He holds the courage we failed to hold ourselves. Ryan stood just behind Ghost, one hand hovering near the dog's shoulder in case he tired. Ghost stood steady, eyes alert, ears forward. Every camera in the room stayed locked on him. When the applause rose, loud and unrestrained, Ghost didn't flinch. He only looked at Ryan and breathed calmly, as if finally, after 14 months of terror, he knew he was seen, known, and safe. After the ceremony, as people filtered out and the lights dimmed, Naomi leaned against the railing, watching Ryan and Ghost quietly. "You know," she said, "most dogs would just rest after everything they've been through." Ryan nodded. "He's not most dogs." "No," she agreed. "He's Atlas." Ryan knelt beside the shepherd, running his hand through the fur along his neck. Ghost turned his head slightly, pressing his cheek into Ryan's palm. "He's earned more than justice," Ryan said softly. "He's earned a life." Naomi smiled. "Then let's help him live it." Outside, the city lights glowed against the fresh snow, and Ghost stepped into the cold air with a steady gait. Not perfect, not painless, but his own. He had been hunted, shot, buried in silence. Now he walked with his head high. Atlas had returned. 3 months slipped by, almost without anyone noticing. Winter had melted into a shy, early spring, the kind that softened the edges of Frostline's harsh mountain ridges. Snow still clung to the shadows beneath the pines, but patches of green pushed through, stubborn and alive. Atlas moved through it all with the slow confidence of an animal relearning his place in the world. His healed scar cut a pale line along his ribs, a reminder of everything he had endured, but his stride had strengthened. He no longer limped unless he pushed himself too hard, and even then he refused to show it. Ryan stood at the edge of a clearing, hands on his hips, staring at the cabin they had spent the last 6 weeks trying to resurrect. The place had been abandoned for nearly a decade, a forgotten ranger station tucked into the side of Pine Cliff Valley. The roof sagged slightly, the deck was half-rotted, and the old stone chimney leaned at an angle that made Naomi mutter every time she looked at it. But it was theirs now, or rather, it was Atlas's. A canine rescue center needed a home. This was where it would begin. Naomi walked out from behind the truck, carrying a toolbox nearly as big as she was. Her hair was tied back, smudged with sawdust, and her sleeves were rolled up. She set the box down and stretched her back. "I'm starting to think this cabin is testing us," she said. Ryan chuckled. "Or maybe it just wants to see if we're serious." They both looked toward Atlas. The German shepherd was perched on a raised patch of earth near the tree line, sunlight catching the amber in his eyes. He wasn't resting. He wasn't wandering. He was watching the woods with a focus that felt older than the mountains themselves. Ryan walked toward him. "You're on patrol again," he murmured. Atlas didn't look away. His ears twitched, his breath steady. He scanned the tree line like he was reading a story written in movement and scent. Every shift of the wind pulled his attention a little deeper. Naomi approached with a fresh bowl of water. "He's doing that more often." "Guarding," Ryan said. "Or remembering," Naomi replied softly. A gust of wind carried the scent of spruce and thawing earth. Atlas finally broke his stare and turned toward them. He walked down the slope with a fluid, purposeful stride and stopped in front of Ryan, touching his nose to Ryan's hand. Ryan knelt to meet him. "You okay?" Ryan asked. Atlas blinked once, slow and steady, before nudging his shoulder against Ryan's chest. It was an answer, but not a simple one. They worked through the afternoon, hauling lumber, sanding floorboards, checking the integrity of the old support beams. The cabin resisted their efforts, but it didn't reject them either. It creaked in a way that felt like waking up after too many years of silence. By late evening, the sun dropped behind the ridge, casting long shadows across the valley. Naomi lit the lanterns. They had strung between the porch posts, and the clearing filled with a warm, golden glow, the type that made the cabin look almost whole again. Atlas lay on the porch, head resting on his paws. His gaze followed their movements, never fully relaxing, even as the night deepened. Ryan joined him, sitting on the porch step. "You know this place better than we do," he said quietly. Atlas's ears flicked. "You picked this clearing," Ryan continued. "You led us here, like you remembered it before we did." Naomi leaned against the railing. Maybe he's not looking for danger. Maybe he's making sure we're worthy of staying. Ryan smiled faintly. "Feels like it." The night grew colder, but the air was calm. For the first time in months, there were no sirens, no interrogations, no gunshots echoing across valleys. Just the quiet breathing of the mountains and the steady rhythm of Atlas's heart. A branch snapped somewhere in the woods. Ryan tensed automatically, but Atlas only lifted his head a fraction. He listened, considered, then settled again. "He knew it was nothing," Naomi said. "I swear he hears the truth before the sound even finishes." "That's what kept him alive," Ryan replied, even when no one else was trying. They stayed like that until the stars sharpened in the sky. The cabin glowed behind them, warm and imperfect, but alive. A beginning. As the lantern light flickered, Atlas shifted closer to Ryan and placed one paw over his boot. A small gesture, almost quiet enough to miss. But Ryan felt it like a promise. After scars, after loss, after everything. Atlas wasn't just guarding the clearing. He was claiming it. His new territory, his new mission, his new life. And with that silent vow, the valley felt different. Not safer, but watched over. Atlas lifted his head once more, looking out across the woods as if whispering an old oath to the mountains. He would protect this place, and the people who had finally protected him. The morning air carried the clean bite of pine and melting frost. Sunlight spilled through the clearing in soft, angled beams, turning the cabin's stained glass windows into bursts of color across the porch. Ryan adjusted the gate latch just as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed up the trail. A yellow school bus pulled to a stop near the edge of the valley road. Its doors creaked open, and a wave of middle schoolers spilled out, their chatter sharp and bright against the quiet mountain air. Naomi walked beside them, pointing out the ridgeline, the rebuilt kennels, and the training yard still under construction. "This place used to be an old ranger station," she told the kids. "Now it's becoming Frostline Canine Recovery and Training Center." A boy near the back lifted his camera, snapping shots of everything. Beside him, a girl pointed at the cabin and whispered to her friend, wide-eyed, "Is that where the hero dog lives?" Ryan smiled at the phrasing, but said nothing. He let them explore, let them take in the history without the shadows it once held. Atlas stood waiting at the top of the porch steps. He didn't bark. He didn't posture. He simply watched them with a calm, regal patience. His stance was steady, scar visible through the shorter summer coat along his rib cage. It didn't make him look weak. It made him look like he'd walked through fire and come out the other side with something unbreakable inside him. When the students reached the porch, they slowed. Even in recovery, Atlas carried a presence that demanded respect without force. Ryan stepped forward. "All right, everyone," he said. "Give him a little space. He'll come to you when he's ready." Atlas took one step down, then another, lowering his head slightly as he approached the group. A hush fell over the kids, the kind of silence that came from awe, not fear. A boy with dark curls lifted his hand timidly. "Officer Ryan?" he asked. "Is it true what the news said? That he survived? All that?" Ryan crouched beside Atlas. "Yeah," he said. "Every word of it." Another child piped up. Did he ever get scared? Ryan looked at the German shepherd beside him. Atlas's eyes were deep and old in a way no child could fully understand. Of course he did. The first boy hesitated, then stepped closer until he was standing just a foot away. He looked down at Atlas, voice small but sincere. Why didn't he give up? Why didn't he run away after people were so cruel to him? The question settled into the clearing like snow. Ryan rested his hand on Atlas's shoulder. The dog didn't flinch. He only looked at the boy, present, steady, patient. Because, Ryan said quietly, some souls protect others even when no one protects them. The boy absorbed the words, blinking a few times as if trying to make room for a new kind of understanding. Slowly he reached out his hand. Atlas leaned forward and touched his nose gently to the boy's palm. A murmur rippled through the group, something soft and reverent. The girl with the camera lowered it, choosing to simply watch. Naomi stepped closer, her voice warm. Atlas isn't just a survivor, he's a teacher. He reminds us why loyalty matters, why courage matters, and why we take care of those who can't speak for themselves. Atlas turned his head toward her, as if acknowledging the compliment before shifting back to the children. He walked along the line, allowing each one to touch him if they wanted. Some did. Some froze with nervous excitement. A few simply watched him move, seeing strength in every step. When he reached the end, he paused beside a small boy who had hung back from the others. The kid kept his hands shoved in his pockets, head down, avoiding eye contact. Atlas stood in front of him for several seconds, then sat. The boy glanced up, startled. Why's he looking at me like that? Ryan stepped forward. He chooses who needs him most. He always has. The boy hesitated, then knelt. Atlas leaned forward and rested his chin gently on the boy's shoulder. The kid gasped, then wrapped both arms around the shepherd's neck. Naomi wiped the corner of her eye. That's the first full hug he's accepted this week. Ryan watched the moment settle into the clearing like a seed taking root. Quiet. Deep. Permanent. The rest of the tour passed with the kind of excited chaos only children could bring. They learned how scent trails worked, how recovery harnesses were fitted, how retired canine units were rehabilitated. But it was Atlas they kept gravitating back to. When the bus finally arrived to take them home, the first boy lingered on the steps. "Officer Ryan," he said, Do you think Atlas can ever forget the bad things that happened to him?" Ryan shook his head gently. "I don't think he forgets, but he doesn't let it decide who he becomes next." The boy smiled faintly. "I want to be like him." Atlas lifted his head, ears forward, as if recognizing the weight of the declaration. As the bus rumbled away down the valley road, dust rising in its wake, Ryan and Naomi turned towards the cabin. Atlas walked ahead of them, tail low but relaxed, steps confident. The kids had come for a field trip. They left with a lesson, and Atlas, Canine D17 survivor, protector, teacher, had passed on something larger than courage. He had passed on a legacy. The sun hung low over Frostline Valley, turning every pine needle into a pinprick of gold. The mountains stood tall around the clearing, their shadows long and blue, protective in a way that felt almost ceremonial. People gathered along the newly built wooden fence, their coats zipped tight against the early spring wind. A banner fluttered overhead. Frostline Canine Sanctuary. Opening day. The sanctuary wasn't large yet. A few kennels built of reclaimed timber, a training yard, a medical wing Naomi had outfitted herself, and the old ranger cabin, now restored into a warm, beating heart for the entire project. But it was enough to begin. Ryan stood near the porch, talking with a cluster of visitors when a reporter with a microphone approached. She was young, sharp-eyed, the type who could read stories between breaths. "Officer Keller," she said, stepping closer. "The whole country followed the investigation. They know what happened on Pine Cliff Ridge. They know Atlas survived something unimaginable. What they don't know is why you stayed with him. Why you kept him with you through everything." Ryan paused. Atlas was lying at his feet, one paw crossed over the other, scar visible but no longer defining him. When Ryan looked down, the shepherd lifted his head. A slow, steady blink. The silent communication of a dog who trusted deeply, and without hesitation. Ryan cleared his throat and rested a hand between Atlas's ears, fingers brushing the thick fur that had grown back over healed wounds. "He didn't just survive the fire," Ryan said quietly. "He survived the truth no one wanted to see." A hush traveled through the crowd, soft as wind brushing across dry grass. Ryan continued, voice rough but steady. "And somehow, he saved me too." The reporter raised her microphone again. "Saved you? In what way?" Ryan turned toward the camera crew now gathering behind her. His expression softened, as if remembering a younger version of himself, the one who had lived with grief, who carried the guilt of a partner lost in the line of duty. The person he had been before Atlas clawed his way back into the world. "He reminded me," Ryan said, "that courage doesn't end when your world breaks. Sometimes it begins there." The reporter nodded slowly, her voice dipping into something gentler. "And him? What happens to Atlas now?" Ryan looked at the shepherd again. Atlas rose to his feet with a quiet grunt, stepped forward, and pressed himself into Ryan's leg with a familiarity that felt like the answer itself. "He stays," Ryan said. "No more chains, no more running, just life, the kind he should have had all along." Camera shutters clicked. A few visitors wiped their eyes. Naomi stood near the sanctuary gate, arms folded, watching with the kind of proud smile she rarely displayed. The reporter hesitated, then asked the question her producers had likely begged her to get. "One last thing, Officer Keller. If you could say something to the viewers watching at home, people who've never met a dog like Atlas, what would you want them to know?" Ryan faced the main camera directly. The crowd quieted. Even the wind seemed to slow. "What's your story with a loyal pet?" The sentence landed with warmth, with weight, with an invitation that didn't ask for applause but for connection. The kind Atlas had rebuilt. One life, one scar, one choice at a time. As if on cue, Atlas lifted his head and turned toward the tree line. The wind shifted. A rustle moved through the forest, subtle but real. Atlas stepped forward, standing between Ryan and the vast sweep of pines. His body relaxed, but his eyes sharpened. Watching, listening, guarding. It wasn't alertness born of fear, it was instinct layered with purpose. As though the mountains whispered something he understood long before humans caught on. Naomi walked up beside Ryan. "You think he senses something?" Ryan shook his head lightly. "I think he's just being who he is." Atlas held his stance, tail still, ears forward. The setting sun framed his silhouette in a blazing outline. He looked like a sentinel chosen by the valley itself. A boy from the school field trip spotted him and ran forward. "Look, he's doing it again. He's guarding the woods." Ryan knelt beside the boy. "He's guarding more than that," he said. "He's guarding the future." The ceremony soon wrapped up, visitors trickling back toward the bus and the parking area. Volunteers began extinguishing lanterns. The air cooled into that quiet mountain blue, the kind that made every sound feel sharper. Ryan and Naomi stood together outside the cabin, the sanctuary glowing behind them. Atlas circled once, checking the perimeter, then returned to Ryan's side and sat tall. The last cameraman approached. "We're signing off. Any final message for your viewers?" Ryan smiled, one hand dropping onto Atlas's back. "Tell them to take care of their dogs. They're watching over us in ways we'll never fully understand." The cameraman nodded and walked away. The clearing dimmed as the sun slipped behind the ridge. The world exhaled, and in that breath, Atlas looked once more towards the trees, his posture calm, but his purpose unmistakable. He wasn't waiting for danger. He wasn't reliving his past. He was claiming the future he nearly never got. And guarding it. For Ryan, for the sanctuary, for every dog who would one day find this place. The valley grew still. The night moved in, and Atlas remained on watch, the quiet promise of a survivor carved into the cold mountain air. Before heading inside, Ryan looked back at the camera crew packing up. To the audience who would watch this story online, who would feel Atlas's presence through their screens, he spoke softly. Support your local rescues. Support your canians. And if you want more stories like his, you know where to find us. The channel name blinked onto the live stream in bold letters. German Shepherd Stories. Atlas gave one final look at the forest, then stepped toward Ryan, ready to begin the next chapter of a life reclaimed. Not an ending. A beginning that echoed far beyond Frostline Valley.